recording. There we go.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was just funny. O'Brien
Once he started.
O'Brien already like trying to ask a couple questions about the movie to clarify, then immediately jumped into before we can hit record.
Yeah.
It's just so funny to me.
We are recording.
All right, so hello everybody. I'm Isaac.
I'm Cole.
I'm O'Brien.
And we thought this would be a fun little podcast called the Criterion Coffee Club. Of course, you probably saw that because when you hit play, you saw the names.
Yeah.
You saw the name right there on the podcast. But the point of this is three of us, we love movies. Cole and I went to school together, and O'Brien here was actually our professor or instructor, and for all the film theory stuff. And Cole and I have a love for making films and also a hatred for making films. But you can't love making films without first hating making films.
They go hand in
hand. Yeah, like it's like, you know, like how with Star Wars, no one loves or hates Star Wars as much as the people that love Star Wars.
Absolutely.
It's exactly the same concept. No one loves making movies as much as the people that hate making movies.
Carter always says, I hate making movies so much. And then always follows it up with, there's nothing I'd rather be doing right now.
It's like an abusive relationship or like an addiction. Like you just keep wanting to do it.
And I think it definitely helps build a real appreciation for film.
Oh yeah, there's that one critic. He you know, it didn't matter how much he despised the film, he knew how hard it was to make movies. So he would always stand up and clap. It might be the worst thing he'd ever seen, but he would always stand up and clap.
I can't remember who that is. I've heard that critic too. And the other thing, you know, it's funny. There's the making movies, the love-hate relationship, but you can always talk about them, which is there's never a hate relationship with that. You just enjoy. It's like your therapy after the pain of making a film.
And Criterion is our therapist.
Yeah.
Say it again, Isaac. Criterion
is our therapist.
Oh, absolutely. Well put. 100%.
Those theater seat reclining chairs are the therapy chairs at the movie theater. So do we want to get into the why, or do you want to hear my fun facts?
Let's start with your fun facts.
Okay, Cole seems to be ready for my fun fact. So I got obviously a movie fact and a coffee fact. So I guess, well, let me explain first for those that are listening. I came up with the coffee aspect of Criterion Coffee Club because O'Brien has late classes, so I would always get coffee from him when he would brew coffee for his late classes. And there was one semester in particular I got really into coffee, but in the worst way possible that I could possibly get into coffee, because I had like 6 classes and I kept, hey O'Brien, I just finished my cup of coffee, do you mind brewing another pot in like the middle of the day? But we kept but O'Brien and I kind of like started like, oh, you know, he'd get the pot going, and then we'd stand around and then we'd talk about some movie we just watched or TV show, or how we're excited about something, or we'd bring up something that we watched in class or something like that. And now I'm just like genuinely a coffee enthusiast. Like I got a pour over and a French press at home.
Yeah.
I got like 6 bags of beans.
Rotation of beans.
Yeah, I got a rotation of beans. I have like a couple 16 ounces, and then my mom was at the farmer's market and some dude was selling like some beans he had roasted, like 2 little 8-ounce bags that I got as well. So Like I go through the process of grinding my own beans,
Yeah.
measuring out the weight of it and the water ratios and
all the paraphernalia. Yeah, I
Sticking
read
it.
that you can tell you're addicted when you've got everything laid out, all the paraphernalia. But it's a good addiction. It's okay.
It's a ritual.
Yeah,
Yes.
the bright doesn't help my case.
Yeah, we gotta bring the bribe.
Yeah, I gotta. I will bring it for one of these recordings, but if we ever do like video,
Yeah,
the first episode
Yeah.
will be the bribe.
Yeah.
And I will brew the coffee with the bribe from start to finish at the start of it, so everybody can watch. If you don't know what a bribe is, you know what? Look it up.
Yeah. That's that little thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you were ever,
O'Brien's seen it.
yeah,
oh, it's
Unfortunately,
if
I
you were
didn't have
ever,
any butane in the lighter,
yeah.
so he didn't get to see me make it, and
Yeah.
I wasted grounds, and I was really sad about that. It wasn't a lot though.
Yeah.
It wasn't a lot, but we're just coffee lovers.
Yeah.
I got right now I'm drinking a local coffee shop cappuccino. I meant to brew my own coffee, but as Cole heard me earlier, there was always something that came up when I was actively trying to leave because I didn't do anything last night because I kind of got home and was like, I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm going to bed. It's late.
yeah, that little tiny coffee maker looks like something. You know, I could just see it. Ethan Hunt taking it on a Mission Impossible mission, and
No, you know how, like,
and the only reason it's there is they're in the middle. He's hanging upside down over a computer. If anything drops on the floor, the alarms go off. But he says to Simon Pegg, I can't watch his character's name. I can't remember. Anyway, he says to Simon, I gotta have a cup of coffee. And the only reason I brought this coffee maker for the mission. Yeah,
That's really funny. Using a bribe to brew coffee mid dangle.
yeah,
like MacGyver or
Yeah.
something, or
oh, totally.
like how James Bond has the martinis shaken not stirred. Like imagine he always had just like a portable version of that with him. It's like the same concept.
That's what that would be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Cole, I hear that your coffee enjoyment of the day was
2 shots of espresso.
black.
Yeah, that's how I start off almost every day. So
And they say I'm addicted.
I wait approximately 1 hour after I wake up before drinking my coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
give it
good.
a little bit of time, and then I immediately consume 2 shots of espresso.
That makes sense. Good way to start the day.
Yeah.
So
allow myself to
fun
wake up
facts.
naturally just a little bit, and
You want a
just-
tiny sip?
Yeah, I think a baby sip.
A little baby sip so you don't over caffeinate yourself with my coffee.
Oh, that's delicious.
Yeah. I love this place.
Yeah. I just got a gift card to there, so you can try it out.
Ooh, dude. Let me know.
Mhm.
I'll go with you.
Yeah, sounds good.
It's like not even 5 minutes for me,
Yeah.
which is a problem.
Yeah.
They know there's like 3 or 4 baristas that like see me and go, "Oh, do you want your cappuccino today?" I'm like,
Yeah.
they recognize Alyssa too.
That's crazy considering she lives,
Not here.
hour and a half, 2 hours away from that place.
Well, she's the one that like showed me the place,
Right.
which is funny because it's in my like
General vicinity. Yeah.
it's like 5 minutes from me.
Yeah.
But like sometimes she goes there, like her and her co-workers go there when they're
Mhm.
coming back from a shoot. So like they'll see both of us. They're like, "Oh, hey." And then she always says something like, "I like your pants." Like, "I like your," you know her.
Yeah.
That was on the recording, and she's gonna sit here listening to this
It'd be
like,
so embarrassed. It's gonna be awesome.
oh. I'm gonna get a message about that after
Yeah.
she listens to it.
Okay.
Wait, that's the ultimate test, though, so I know she listened to it.
Right.
Well, O'Brien, what coffee enjoyment are you having?
What coffee enjoyment did I have today?
Yeah.
I got to admit, I'm kind of hoarding my that coffee that not to mention names, but this with the stickers on your computer. But the
Yeah.
but the yeah that brand I'm hoarding it. So I just started off with some Dunkin' Donuts coffee, and that's what I'm on. But what were those fun facts you got, Isaac? I was the
Oh yeah. Sorry, I got sidetracked.
We talked
coffee
about
can do
coffee.
that.
Well, we didn't explain the coffee aspect of this. We just went, oh, we all like movies,
And
then,
coffee.
like immediately, I guess coffee. No, we just had 2 shots of espresso.
I love that.
All right, so do you want the coffee fact or the movie fact?
Well, we just talked a lot of coffee, so go ahead and give me the coffee.
All right. King Gustav III of Sweden commissioned a study to prove coffee was poisonous. Overseen by 2 doctors, a prisoner was forced to drink 3 pots of coffee a day. Both Gustav and the 2 doctors died before the prisoner, though.
Makes sense.
That's beautiful.
That's a happy prisoner.
But since that's a small fact, I got another one. Like, scientists have found that if you have like 1 to 2 cups of coffee a day, or in your case 2 shots of espresso,
right?
It actually helps lower the risk of dementia.
Okay, that's awesome. It's good.
Yeah, it's actually
good to know.
And also like heart failures and other heart disease related things as well. But if you like over caffeinate, like if you go a full pot of coffee every single day, you increase the risk of your heart failing. So it's a
but you still prevent dementia. That's on the other, because I kind of do a pot of coffee a day.
I used to, and then I was like, I have graduated. Now I'm going to sleep.
Yeah.
Which is great. Now, my movie fact, and I was actually thinking about giving y'all a different movie fact, and I was like, no, this one is perfect for the first episode. Do you guys know what the first movie to have audio commentary was?
Oh, I do not.
No.
Really? And do you know who? I think you guys are also going to love who did the audio commentary.
Okay.
So, on their second release on Laserdisc, Criterion found out that Laserdisc had enough storage left on it than like VHS tapes, obviously, which is why they did Laserdisc in the first place, because it was higher quality. But they found that there was still enough room after they put the movie on to put bonus features.
Yeah.
The first of these bonus features that they thought of doing was audio commentary. So on their second release, the Laserdisc spine number of number 2, King Kong, the original King Kong, had audio commentary done by none other than everybody's favorite jazz-loving actor, Jeff Goldblum.
Wait, so that's completely unrelated.
I was thinking,
well, everybody was dead by that point.
Right. Like, I guess we get Jeff Goldblum to do it.
Apparently, that movie is one of his Jeff Goldblum's favorites.
Of course it is.
Which makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
I really want to listen to that now.
You can actually find it online, even though Criterion never did, because the problem is like licensing, which is why not all their Laserdisc managed to make it to DVD, Blu-ray, 4K yet. But like you can see some of them, like Baron Munchester. I don't know the name off the top of my head. I know the cover. Or like the first 2 Police Stories were also Laserdisc.
Right.
But like some other movies that you may not know were actually in the collection at one point, like Pulp Fiction.
I didn't know.
Yeah, Pulp Fiction and King Kong were both in the Laserdisc version, as was Citizen Kane. That's why Citizen Kane came so much later than something like number 17 Solo or 120 Days of Solo. Because there's a licensing thing where they already got the licensing once. It's harder to get it a second time.
Well, they don't have any. I didn't think there was any Tarantino that was part of the collection.
Right?
So
yeah.
I guess Pulp Fiction was.
Pulp Fiction was.
Yeah.
But Tarantino's also, his movies are known to be like really hard in the licensing side of things because and it's not Tarantino at all. It's just because his movies
so popular.
Are super popular. They make a bunch of the big bucks and studios are really greedy about it. But because it's a lot for the licensing for like Criterion, because it's not they're doing a license to do a Blu-ray disc.
Right.
They're doing licensing to do bonus features. They're also getting a license to be able to do custom made covers.
Right.
So all the original covers that Criterion does, that's its own licensing thing they have to deal with. And then if they do a re-release to some degree, that's another licensing. So that's why like with like 4K disc, you'll see that they've shifted to Blu-ray 4Ks only now. But like the 4K disc, like anytime, like for instance, they just announced Flow, which won Best Animated Movie at the Oscars as an upcoming release, but it's getting both 4K and Blu-ray. Whereas like some of their older movies that have been in the collection and circulating for a while have yet to be in 4K because that means they would have to go through the process of getting the license again to redo it. So that's why you see like a slow trickle down.
Right. Like this last year, we just started getting some of the Kurosawa films.
Yeah. That's why like Seven Samurai took a while.
Yeah.
I've got the Jeff Goldblum vibe in my head real quick. There's a connection between Jeff Goldblum and today's film, 100%. Jeff Goldblum, with that first commentary, was in a film called Between the Lines. And here's the connection. When you look at Jeff Goldblum in his first feature, Between the Lines, a film about a small newspaper, like an urban newspaper, like the old Houston Press used to be, when you go to Houston and pick up that big old, it's been years since they actually had it printed, but it's like an urban newspaper, all sorts of interesting, hard-hitting stories and where you want to go to see bands and stuff like that. So Jeff Goldblum plays part of this little journalistic crew, and you can tell it's his first movie. It's Jeff Goldblum. He's himself. He's Jeff Goldblum. That's going to be Jeff Goldblum forever. He's the Jeff Goldblum that when you go to a bar, you might have a nice conversation, but you'll buy the beer for him. He'll be broke. You'll buy the beer for him. You'll buy the next beer for him. He won't even say thanks. That's Jeff Goldblum. And so in the same way, Jack Nicholson, this is like one of his first films. Maybe it's not his first film, but he plays Jack Nicholson. There's no variation. It's the same Jack Nicholson that's going to be Jack Nicholson forever. And it's just amazing when you saw Jack Nicholson in this film, like, oh, it's a young Jack Nicholson. Maybe there's some nuances, some differences. Nope, it's Jack Nicholson.
That they are of the same like line, like they just are their personality.
They really are, and you just love them. But there's not a lot of nuances. That like, wow,
they're so naturally charismatic as people that it just translates.
But I think both of them deserve a lot of credit as actors.
Oh yeah,
especially Jeff Goldblum. I feel like Nicholson gets it a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's tied for Oscar nominations with Daniel Day-Lewis. for acting
because we all know John Williams has won the most Oscars,
right?
Gotten the most nominations and the most Oscars.
Wow.
But like Jeff Goldblum is such an amazing actor as well, like in his own. Like I watched this show that came out and it did suffer the Netflix curse of it got one season. You were hoping for a second season and then it got canceled. It was called Chaos, but he played Zeus in it. And I remember thinking like going into it when I first heard the production started, I was like, oh, I'm watching it because I love Greek mythology. I love Jeff Goldblum. The idea of him as Zeus is awesome. And I remember watching the first episode. I was like, yeah, that's Jeff Goldblum. I'll still continue. And I'm so glad I did because it became so much more than Jeff Goldblum and became more like the Zeus that I know from Greek mythology, just completely unhinged. Like he just completely lost himself. And like it made it like right after I was like, yeah, I don't think I would talk to Jeff Goldblum, like that kind of level of unhinged, or it makes you feel like I don't know if I like Jeff Goldblum anymore. Oh, horrible.
There's some really interesting Jeff Goldblum stories out there.
Oh yeah, my favorite Goldblum, my Goldblumingness.
Yeah.
It's the most Goldblum of all Goldblums. Disney Plus, when it first came out, because Disney has stakes in Nat Geo. So when they came out with Disney Plus, they were like, all the Star Wars, all the Disney, all the Pixar, all the Marvel, all the Nat Geo, and they had original stuff for each one of them to like showcase to get people of all the to try to cast a wide net to get a large audience. And for Nat Geo, their original show was called The World According to Jeff Goldblum. And it was a little docu-series. And it would be something, it would be a topic like ice cream. And they would talk about the history of like ice cream, but the person talking about it was Jeff Goldblum. They would send Jeff Goldblum out to like Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah.
And they would explain the process of making ice cream and how they make ice cream specifically. And then he would go out, they would find some like mom and pop ice cream shop that nobody's heard of before, and they would send Goldblum there, and then he would learn. And he actually did like shrooms in that episode, actually.
Awesome.
Right, with the person of that shop, because he was like,
why would they?
The guy was like, yeah, we're going to come up with the flavor based after you, Goldblum. That's our activity for today. He was like, oh, wow. La da 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 da, doing Goldblum things, just dancing and random bursts of singing. And he would go, and then he was like, yeah, we're going to go out to the woods. We're going to do shrooms and find your flavor. Well, they didn't say that specifically. They heavily implied it because they're on Disney Plus. And then, like, literally, you proceeded to watch him just, whoa. It was great. It was a great show. There was one on sneakers, and he went to like.
He loved that show too. I think that's one of his favorite things to do ever. As an actor, or
2 seasons.
Personality.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was 2 seasons, and then Disney not only canned it, but they removed it from the platform.
Oh,
where can you find it now?
Nowhere. Yeah, they removed it completely because it was Disney Plus original, so nobody else had the license for it.
Man.
And they removed it from the platform. Unlike Warner Brothers, it was not tax write-offs. It was actually even worse than that, or arguably, you could argue which one's worse.
Yeah.
But this one was, they didn't want to pay residuals, so they removed like 50 plus originals from Disney Plus and Hulu.
Oh wow!
And yet it's so strange. You call up Disney and ooh, Mandalorian, but Honora comes right there. It comes up right there, and here they are getting rid of Jeff Goldblum and his mushrooms.
But I think that's a perfect segue
to actually talking about
saying why
Criterion.
Why Criterion?
Oh, yeah.
Why did we have
I think you briefly talked about it when you're describing all the different physical releases and why they
what are y'all's why Criterion story? Why, how did you find it? Why did you just feel this like all of a sudden it feels like home, like a wonderful food you can order, like, my God, I got to go to that restaurant again. How did you get started?
So when I was attending Blinn Community College, I was a theater major. My associate's degree is in theater.
Red flag.
But the theater teacher there taught a film appreciation class. I was like the only film class taught at that school.
At Blender Garden.
Yeah. At Blender Garden was a film appreciation, and it was taught by Greg Wise. He's like one of the coolest dudes I've ever met. Awesome dude. And I mean, I've always loved film, but that film appreciation class did open up to the fact like this might be something that I want to do. And it was largely because he really had like he made everyone do a report on an auteur director, and like the way it was it was just like random selection, and I got well, we had to pick like one of the directors we had talked about, but it was like a draft, like no one could do the same one. And so I ended up picking Akira Kurosawa. Just because when they were talking about it in class, he sounded neat. And I went to Blend's library and I rented Rashomon. And I still have that copy of Rashomon and Throne of Blood. I rented from Blend's library, and they were Criterion copies.
I'm proud of you, Cole. That's yeah.
Of the film.
You know what's worth stealing? That's
yeah. I stole them. And so I have 2 copies of stolen Criterion films from Blend's library.
Amazing.
And those were the first Criterion things I had, but I was like immediately impressed by how good Rashomon looked for a film that as old as it is, and I think there's like it, not that it looks perfect, but considering everything that film's had to go through to get this physical copy, I think it looks pretty amazing. And the bonus features are really cool. And Throne of Blood, it's just one of my all-time favorite movies, if not my favorite movie.
The bonus features, and all of a sudden you're going, wait a minute, this is cool.
Yeah, so I was like, what is this? What is this thing about? And then obviously, as I became a film student at Lamar and like reconnecting with James Cottingham and becoming friends, with Carter and stuff, and next thing you know,
not me though.
and you.
Yeah, no, you didn't mention me, so clearly.
Well, I'm saying like
clearly we didn't become friends.
Well, I think I it took a little bit longer for you and me to become, I think, as good of friends.
Well, we didn't have. I know your first semester we didn't have any classes
together.
I was the guy that was like the transaction.
Yeah,
like you came in to rent out equipment, and if I didn't like the way you returned it, I would make fun of you.
Yeah,
which is something I definitely did to pretty much everybody.
Yeah,
I think I still do that, and I don't even like go to school there or work there. I'm like, you returned it looking like this. What's wrong with you?
But yeah, anyway, and they collect Criterion copies, and
the collect is I think putting it lightly.
Yeah. They have a problem.
Can you remember your first Criterion date, Isaac?
I don't have as like heartwarming of a story like Cole does, because yours is theft.
The best kind though. It's
we wouldn't have been friends had you not taken that class.
Yeah, and stolen those movies.
And I would not have the kind of appreciation for you had you not stolen those movies. But I've always been a big proponent for physical media.
Yeah.
Because for a while I grew up without internet for a while. Like we didn't really have much of a need for the longest time. It was just kind of like an expense for what? MapQuest? Like and then MapQuest stopped being a thing too.
Yeah.
And it was like why the internet? So like even in my generation, I already have like a big issue where like somebody will make some kind of meme reference of like some YouTube. I'm like, like I'm confused. Like I understand them more now, but but we had movies, lots of movies. Like I mean, we had like this big, I can't remember the name, some stupid French word that doesn't make sense, like every French word. Armoire or something like that, where a TV was, but it had like cabinets underneath it, and it was like 4 rows deep of movies on the bottom shelf, and then it was only as deep on the top shelf. It only could go back so far, so it was only 1 row, and then we had vertical stacks on top of everything, and then depending on the place we lived in, like we had another cabinet that was dedicated to like 2 shelves of movies.
Yeah.
And then we had like this one like stack movie holder kind of thing as well. And that was just Disney movies. Like that was just solely Disney movies right there. So it was like we never. So it was like, and we had cable, but like if we wanted to watch something, we had to like do physical, and we had VHS tapes like for the longest time, and then our VCR broke, which sucked. So I didn't get to watch Batman '89 on VHS, but that's neither here nor there. And so like as we're kind of shifting, we started like shifting into the like as a society and more into like this digital age. That was something that always retained for us, like me and my mother, because at one point we found out about like Disney Movie Club rewards, and here's where the internet started becoming a little bit more useful for us. But we signed up for that, and then we just started getting a movie a month. Obviously they were all Disney movies, but like we had the option. They would give you like 3 options. And then you would just pick one of them. So it's like, oh, we don't have this one yet, or some of them Disney likes to keep buried because they're so terrible. But like Cinderella 3, Disney likes to keep stuff like that buried. But we would also find a movie that would become one of our favorite movies of that year through that, even though we wouldn't expect it, because Disney only had, like, we already had all what's considered the best Disney movies. But like we found, like, there was a movie called Black Hole. And O'Brien and I have talked about this.
Oh, I love that film.
Okay, I have too.
It's a sci-fi movie. This is one of the earliest Disney tried to do sci-fi. It predates Tron. And like, as you know how Disney handles Tron, it's very like they kind of want it to be their sci-fi thing, and then they don't. But then Disney's always been super weird about sci-fi, and Black Hole is like, I think, the epitome of that. It was like this, we never heard of it, and then we found out later it just didn't make any money in the box office. It had a horrible marketing release, just like every other Disney sci-fi film that's ever existed.
Animated, they were trying to. It was their first PG movie. They were trying to stay alive, and it is the strangest film. It's a great film, actually. But
it was at that time when Disney started taking like a downturn. Before they came back with The Great Mouse Detective.
Well, before they
that's a true story. Great Mouse Detective saved that company. I don't know if you knew that.
That's wild.
Well, before they made that classic Heavyweights with Ben Stiller. That's when they turned the corner. I'm kidding.
5 movies leading up to that all bombed drastically in the box office, and like only 1 or 2 of them are good. One of them being Black Hole, and then Great Mouse Detective. So it was stuff like that. Like Black Hole. I would love going to the movie store. Like we have Second Trials, which is a big chain. It's all secondhand stuff, and it's only the movies there are only from some random Uncle Jerry that passed away, and he had movies in the attic. That kind of thing, like some random movie. But we also had, I guess I'm triangulating our exact location, but we had a Suncoast here as well. RIP, that just recently closed. And then I found out later that was one of the last remaining coasts in the world. And I was like, oh,
it's like the last blockbuster in Alaska. The last,
it really was. And and I found out it was a huge change in the night. I didn't think about it because I was like 7, and we always had it in our mall. So it was just like something that was always there for me. But
great bargains at the end, though. Wow.
It was kind of like the finding out about, and I always loved like special features, just like watching behind the scenes. A little kid me didn't understand anything that was going on. I barely understood the movies I was watching, let alone the special features of how they made it and like the in-depth conversations and stuff. But it was like always finding something new like that, just randomly, that I probably wouldn't have gone out of my way to watch, because in this physical world and digital world, you get stuck in an algorithm. Like Netflix is like, oh, you like Chris Evans, here's more Chris Evans. And then it's like, Chris Evans doesn't have the greatest track record of an actor. I think he knows it too. Like, he has some good movies, don't get me wrong. And he's a good actor. He's an even great actor at times.
What we say yes and no to sometimes is
but sometimes he's got to pay the bills. He's not always Captain America and sometimes those bills come a knocking.
Yeah.
But and then when I got to like college and I was taking film theory with you, Cole, and it was taught by our special instructor O'Brien Stanley, and he
And
talked
Andre
about,
we were probably
yes,
co-teachers
and
then.
Andre. It
Yeah.
was both. It was I think y'all's first
Co-teaching. Yeah.
co-teaching. But I also was a student worker there, so I'd catch O'Brien in the hallways, and he'd always say something like, "Oh, you know, you should check out Criterion. They always got the goodies." And he was telling me about the streaming service. Like, "Oh, you got to check out Criterion." I was like, "Okay." And then like I think what finally really got me to like go out of my way to check it out was some combination of Cole, our friends James and Carter,
Right.
some combination of those three told me in the same day O'Brien told me. And O'Brien told me about the flash sale, or to be on the lookout for that kind of thing. And I just so happened to be looking up the website, and I was like, "Oh, 50% off all discs. That's
Woo!
crazy. I'm gonna get like 2 movies." Um, and I got there are 2 new releases because they were just like, I saw them like right there on the thing. I was like, I don't know what any of this means. Um because and I got Throwdown and Exotica,
Yeah.
which at the time were 2 brand new releases. And it was kind of like when I was a kid and I'd find some random movie that I probably wouldn't go out of my way to watch normally.
Yeah.
And that's always something that's remained even today. But
I just want to say I think that's a great benefit of Criterion.
absolutely.
Is that like I just like having Criterion copies of movies, and if I see a Criterion copy, it's on sale. There's some aspect, some connection to it. Either I think it's interesting, there's an actor I like in it, it's a director that I know I enjoy, but I haven't seen this movie. I am actually more likely to buy that than a Criterion movie I've seen before a lot of the times.
Yeah.
Because I just like this. I have some type of draw to this. It's Criterion, and so I'm going to get it, and I might watch something that's like out of my wheelhouse, and then could be.
Oh, really... good point, Cole. Yeah.
The funniest thing is, I had zero connection to either of these movies.
Yeah, it's just seriously, I'm doing it.
Completely blind by. I didn't know the directors. Yeah. I didn't know any of the actors. One of them was a foreign film. Yeah. Like I couldn't even speak the language or understand it. And the closest thing was, I absolutely love. We are going to find out in this podcast how much I love martial art movies. Yeah. I love kung fu films. And the closest thing is Throwdown is judo. And I was like, "Oh, I've done kung fu, I've done the karate,
let's try judo.
Let's go into judo." And it's like just throwing.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if y'all know this, but like judo's just throwing.
Yeah.
So like that's why it's called Throwdown, is because they're throwing each other the whole movie. But
that sounds kind of awesome.
It's actually a really good movie. I really recommend it. And now I see that director from Throwdown, Johnny 2. I'm like, "Oh, it's a Johnny 2 film. I'm gonna buy it."
Yeah.
Like I have another Criterion that has Michelle Yeoh in it, which is the Heroic Trio. It's one of the double features, Heroic Trio and Executioners, and it's got Michelle Yeoh, but it's both directed by Johnny 2. And I actually didn't realize this until after. I bought it because Michelle Yeoh's in it. Yeah. That was the only reason I bought it. Yeah. I was like, "You don't need to tell me anything else about the movie. I'm buying it." Sold. Yeah, and then I found out later, oh, it's by the same guy that
did Throwdown.
This is like 20 Criterion films later. I'm like, "Oh, this is by the same guy that did my first like Criterion film." And then like I was at a secondhand store, and actually I was at Suncoast while they were closing, and all their movies were like $3. And I was just perusing. I was like, I saw the name Johnny 2, and I was like, "Oh wait, I know that name." And I still have yet to watch this movie, mostly because the disc is scratched up and I'm afraid to find out it's unusable. But I was like, "Oh, I know this movie." So I bought it for like, $3. And who knows, when I watch it, it's running on Karma. I've heard really good things about it from like his filmography. But I think that's a huge thing for me in Criterion. Carter's gonna listen to this podcast and he's gonna have a conniption when he finds out that almost all my Criterion films I know nothing about when I bought them.
Yeah.
Like absolutely nothing.
Well, you know, that's an interesting point. I can, the Barnes and Noble sale every 6 months. You go there, and I never thought about what you said, the original artwork, and that artwork, because you reminded me of like I like to do about half and half. Something I've heard of maybe that I don't have, but then just something you're kind of trying to get, like you guys said, something out of your wheelhouse, and that artwork will pull you in. And I remember just some of the artwork, like the mysterious spy stuff. There's one, Le Silence de la Mer, by Jean-Pierre Melville. Incredible French director. He's all over Criterion. But I just got it because of the artwork. And it's an amazing film. And all of a sudden, then you start to explore the director, and you go from there. It's a
whole new world. Yeah, physical media really does, because you're like actively breaking out of the algorithm.
Yeah, you are. And then also
you're breaking.
I also think a really important thing about physical media is that it encourages you to rewatch because you have it. Physically. And then you start to build a relationship with this piece of media over years. And I think like that is how we all learn to love movies as children. And we like lose that as adults, and we start exclusively just trying to binge and stream whatever the newest thing is. I can't tell you as a child how many times I watched Jurassic Park. I can say
they need to put that on Criterion.
Jurassic Park, that would be I can say every line as they happen. Like I watched it so much as a kid because I had it on VHS and I knew how to work the VHS, and so I watched Jurassic Park constantly.
That's the third Goldblum we've brought up today.
I
think it's a sign that he should be our first guest. No guest until Jeff Goldblum agrees.
There you go. That's right, Jeff. Liam.
No,
it was Liam, or was it Ian or Liam? Ian, not Liam.
Ian Malcolm.
I have his laugh in that movie like on constant repeat in my head.
Well, my first one, real quick, was Night of the Hunter, which was we watched it in film school, and somehow I thought, I've got to see this film again. It's one of the strangest films I've ever seen. Serial killing preacher with Robert Mitchum. Just unbelievable. The lighting is incredible. It's just an incredible film. It was Charles Laughton's only film ever to direct, and it's just got a fascinating history. Perfect Criterion fodder, and so once I heard, it's one of those movies that just kind of was in the back of your mind in film school. You forget about it, and then all of a sudden, wow, what was that film? And then there it is on the Criterion Collection. I bought it, and then I realized this is something else. This Criterion Collection thing, and oh my, that was, and it's funny, physical media too. I will never loan that copy out. I like to keep it close to me, no matter what. If I'm teaching science fiction, I'll pop in Night of the Hunter in my movie bag, and there's a little thing the kind of where you loan out movies. I'll put it this way. There's a woman that we exchange films. And so I knew I wanted to loan her Night of the Hunter, but I bought another copy, a non-Criterion, cheaper copy, just so I could, because if it's not coming back, it's
have okay. A loaner.
No, I get that.
It's my loaner copy of Night of the Hunter, and it's not my Criterion copy. Yeah.
A friend of mine. No, I get that. I've done something similar.
That's awesome.
But not for Criterion specifically, because I had a friend in college, Cade. You remember Cade? He wanted to see La La Land, but he had to do it because, like, for some reason his wife did not like Emma Stone. So he would have to do it on his own time. And I was like, oh, I got a copy I can lend you. And I had just purchased the 4K copy, so I gave him my old Blu-ray copy. I haven't seen it since, but I also
Yep.
didn't care.
Right.
Because that's one of my favorite films. And I was like, I need a 4K version of this.
Yeah.
And like that's another thing is people, yes, physical can be more expensive. I think if you do physical, like us three do physical, yeah, it's more expensive than streaming. But in general, it can genuinely be cheaper. You go to some random garage sale,
Thrift store.
your thrift store, or like even Second and Charles is like a mainstream
Yeah.
chain across the country, but like $5 for
Yeah.
like a Criterion, like I like
Hey, I've
listen,
gone to thrift stores when we were up in New Braunfels, and they had like just a shelf full of
yeah,
movies. It's $1 for a DVD, $3 for a
Oh,
Blu-ray.
yeah,
And you're just
yeah. Alyssa and I, at one point, we had seen a 4K Criterion copy of Thelma and Louise,
no,
which
wow.
has a lot more than just the disc in it.
Yeah.
And it's got like some physical like postcards and stuff because they made it a big deal when they did this
Right.
4K release. $25.
That's awesome.
And that was, I think, the most expensive thing that day because everything else was like other boutique labels.
Yeah.
And like Arrow, Criterion, even,
Mm.
and it was like all $10 or $5.
That's awesome.
Like I think the most we paid outside of that was I paid $11 for Arrow Video's True Romance copy, which was on the same level of Thelma and Louise, where they had like these physical postcards and stuff. Like it's a $30 box set.
Oh yeah.
Dollars, and all those discs were in perfect condition. Like nothing wrong with. Like there was
Wow.
no reason they should have priced it the way they should have.
They just did.
Even the Thelma and Louise had like a one of those like plastic cover things where like you have to get someone to open it, and it was still
$25.
Like
and you know who pairs up
Barnes and Noble
with Gina Davis the best in so many films is Jeff Goldblum. Jeff Goldblum, Gina Davis. Just thought of it's coming back to Jeff.
but even like Barnes and Noble, they don't just have 50% off Criterion. Like they're running a 50% off sale right now for cult classic films. And they do 50% off for like Arrow, or like maybe it'll be some director's birthday, and then you can get all their movies for 50% off. Or like I've been there a few times where there's like Paramount, and all Paramount related films, regardless of the label.
I feel like physical media, with like movies, especially like boutique labels, Barnes and Nobles is the
Barnes and Noble, or even like sometimes a little bit like you wouldn't expect them to have it, or you wouldn't expect anyone to carry it. Like I found out through Barnes and Noble that Shogun, it was an FX limited series, which is based off a book, which is apparently incredibly long because I'm like halfway through the audiobook, but it's only part one. I found that out when I got halfway. I was like, "Oh, this is a challenge." It's good though. Don't get me wrong. But I found out that there was a limited series before the FX limited series back in like the 80s.
Oh, that's right.
Died. But Barnes and Noble had that copy there. I was like, "Wow." I didn't buy it, but the point of my story. The point of my story is sometimes something that you wouldn't expect to be in circulation anymore. Or it's because Uncle Jerry passed away 5 years ago and they gave away the movies in his attic. Like when Suncoast closed, I got a copy for like 70 cents or something like that of the Zeta Project. You may not know what the Zeta Project is. That is a cartoon show like for kids that was a spinoff of Batman Beyond, which was of course a spinoff of Batman the Animated Series. It was a spinoff of a spinoff, but it's one of the many shows over the last like 25 years that Warner Brothers has like done as a tax write-off. So it legally does not exist anymore. So you can't find anything official. They don't do any new releases. They can't stream it legally. You can't stream it. They don't even post anything about it on like their socials or YouTube because it doesn't exist according to the tax write-off. So it's things like that that's like really important. And I guess that's the important part for those that don't really know what Criterion is, because I'm sure a lot of our friends and family are watching this like, what's the point of this? And it's the whole point Criterion makes is their purpose is to preserve media, especially like film. And they say that it's for because it's important, maybe culturally or on a filmmaking level. But if a movie needs saving, it doesn't matter how terrible it is. It could be like some like once when the Dracula movies started getting really bad, like Blood of Dracula or something like that, then they will preserve it. And there are other labels than Criterion. I mentioned a couple like Arrow Video or like Radiance. I know is a really popular one right now, but physical media is just so special, and it's beautiful.
Beautiful. Okay.
So
we want to segue.
Do we want to segue into the actual purpose?
To the movie.
So we
Criterion, every movie it has a spine number.
Yes.
And the way we're selecting movies to talk about on this podcast is random selection.
Because there's just too many right now.
Because there's so...
I think they're at 12...
They're the 1200s.
1234, but they also just announced like 8 more films or something like that. So they're gonna bump up the price a little bit.
And then this one... Bump up the numbers. What was the spine number on this one?
Number 548.
Yeah. That's good memory.
Came up in a random generator, right? A random number generator.
Yeah, and at the end of the episode, we'll
that's going to be exciting
for our next one.
And this one is such a good film. What the random generator picked.
I will say, I don't think this is a very rare chance because of how big the numbers are. But if it is a newer number, and like let's say we get number 1230. We get like 1230, and there's no like exact Criterion release. Like maybe somebody is listening to this podcast and only wants to watch the Criterion version of this.
Yeah.
If it's 1230 and you can't find the Criterion version of it, that goes back to licensing, or sometimes not even licensing. It just takes a little bit longer for that movie in particular to be preserved. Like clean up the film strips or regrade or fix the audio or something. It might be
what they're doing to preserve and remaster it.
Yeah, it might take longer than something like 1231. So sometimes 1231 actually gets released before 1230, and sometimes you even go all the way to 1234 before 1230 sees the light of day. Like Arrow Video just delayed for like I think the 3rd time this year, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
And they already have the other $2 movies out on 4K, and they like just delayed for like the 3rd time in the last like month. But I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
If anybody's trying to be a purist here, I don't think us three are gonna do that. But like any of our listeners.
And what was this was number 536, right?
548.
Oh, gotcha.
A Safe Place.
A Safe Place by Henry. And just to, as a little bit of a spicy tidbit for listeners, this and classic Criterion stuff, this led me, you start doing research, and all of a sudden through this film, I discover David Duchovny's first film from The X-Files, right?
Oh.
No wonder I picked it. I didn't even think why I picked this mug, but now I know. But David Duchovny was Orson Welles' last film, and it was a heavy contributor to get Orson Welles, a young David Duchovny, 1987, and Henry Jaglom, our director today of A Safe Place, played a big part. I think he directed Orson Welles' last film, and which starred David Duchovny. And that's just classic Criterion tidbits or mind-blowing stuff. I'm going, Orson Welles and David Duchovny, come together because of this guy, Henry Jaglom, who was a huge friend of Orson Welles. And he had lunch with him twice a week. And Orson Welles wanted to record their lunches. They'd crack out the Nagra tape recorder, and they recorded their lunches for like 10 years, and then that becomes a book. It became a book like 25 years after Orson Welles passed away, but they used those recordings. Peter Biskind, a good writer, said, "You've got, at some point, you got all these tapes. We got to turn this into a book." And so anyway, all that stuff comes from this movie. It's like the Criterion goodies just never end. But I did enjoy the film.
And it's also Jack Nicholson is starring in this.
Exactly.
I didn't know anything about Welles,
this. And this is right after Easy Rider, which apparently Henry Jaglom was he's an uncredited editor for Easy Rider.
Wow.
Right. And helped Jack Nicholson, who's apparently also was involved in the editing process somehow, even though he's just
crazy
actor, but not even like that major of a role in the film. He's like a side character. He's important.
That's like Seth Rogen doing VFX for Jurassic Park level. You don't expect it out of
Jeff Goldblum doing
it. But anyway, I don't know, like if Jack Nicholson was just there or putting input,
pointing.
Right,
he's the guy with the finger, just sitting there, change that.
But apparently, the director of this film was also an uncredited editor on Easy Rider.
That's crazy.
So
it's been a lot, and that's back in the day when the editors did not get a lot of credit. You watch older movies, and you'll see the music guy gets his own credit, producers all sorts of their own credit, one at a time. But editor and sound design just comes up on the roll, and and sometimes you'll see ACE. You'll see the editing, the chops that they have, but still, it's not enough credit. And so, that's he talked about that. I watched this director talked about his experience of editing Easy Rider, and then how that led to this film. You're right, exactly right. And then he gets Jack Nicholson. They're friends, and the way he got Orson Welles, apparently he just he wanted Orson Welles for the part of the old, kind of the older guy, that kind of the mentor granddad of Tuesday Weld, was Susan slash what's the other name she uses in the film?
Noah.
Right. And so he goes up and just stalks Orson Welles, basically knocks on the door. He said he almost put his foot in the doorway, so Orson Welles doesn't know him at all. But he says he talks him into the part, literally just harangues him into playing the part, because Orson Welles loves magic, and so he was going to be a magician in the movie.
That's so awesome.
I think Orson Welles is a great, like, kind of like a teacher for young filmmakers.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Not because he made Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
Well, in a way. This guy wrote, directed, acted, and produced Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
Yep. Which is considered the greatest movie of all time.
And also a lot of other movies where he's that level of, like, centrist.
But Orson Welles, at the end of the day, did this movie.
Yeah.
Which I have opinions on. But he also was the voice of Unicron in the Transformers movie in 1985.
The last thing he did.
I don't think filmmakers of any level should ever say that they're too good for a project, because Orson Welles did Transformers.
Yeah, hey, Orson Welles just did things that he thought was interesting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was what you guys were talking about at the beginning of the project. It's like, even though the cooking of the meal, the making of the film, you may hate it at some point, but Orson Welles he loved that meal, and he kept on making films when he had trouble, and he would do other projects. He would do projects, and even side projects where he would act in. He would always put everything he had into that acting, but he was always taking that money that he get from acting to put into some independent project, because he couldn't get funding from studios.
And that's a big thing. Like, you're never too good for a project, guys. Just shut up.
Yeah,
you're full of yourself. You're never too good for a project. Even if you know in your deepest part of your heart that it's terrible, you're never too good.
And I think Orson Welles is really interesting in this film. Like his character. First of all, anyone who decides to watch this movie, I'm so glad Isaac told me on the phone before I watched the movie. He was like, just be ready. The way it's edited together is not chronological. We are constantly jumping between past, present, future.
Right.
In a way that's really interesting. And Orson Welles' character in particular, the magician, he's this Central Park, like stereotypical Central Park
random old guy
magician. Right. Yeah, he makes his money playing chess in Central Park, and he's also does magic on the side. Right.
Magic is putting it lightly. This guy's a wizard.
Yeah. Wizard. Yeah.
He is like this New York personification of like wise wizard,
right.
And I don't know how much of that character she's actually seen as an adult. There's that one scene, the very first scene, we see her noticing the magician out her window.
Mm-hmm.
Later in the movie, we cut and there's a child version of her looking out that same window.
That's right.
Down at the magician. And so I actually don't know how much of the scenes with the magician are actually happening when she's an adult, even though most of it's filmed as her as an adult.
If I remember correctly, this is before because this is the first 5 minutes, so it's like right before I realized we were doing past,
what was
present,
happening.
future. Yeah. I always try to go into a movie blind. I'm like, your synopsis sucks, Google. You told me too much information. I know who the bad guy is now. That was a mistake for this movie. I definitely should have read that beforehand. But if I remember correctly, you see kind of from Orson Welles' perspective, he's looking up at the window, and it's the child version of her looking out. But then when it cuts from the window down to her, it's an older version of her, more like past self, still adult, but past self. Yeah, these are several points of past, present, future. It's not like Moonlight, where it's like you get 8-year-old version, 18-year-old version, 38, 28, or something like that.
Or even something like the Witcher season 1 on Netflix, where I'm being serious though, where it's like I know you're laughing, but I'm being serious. Where it's like certain story arcs are taking place at different times, and then they all kind of line up at the end. This is very
Westworld does that.
Right. And this
spoiler.
This is very much she is in and out of time.
Yeah.
Like the way she perceives her life in New York is very much
dreamlike.
Yeah, it's dreamlike. And this movie does play around with the idea that I don't think she's fully certain what is dreams, what is reality, what is past, what is present.
Because she's definitely presented as like a very childlike adult. It even says that on like the synopsis. A childlike adult lives in a dream world of New York.
She is the very stereotypical like late 60s, 70s flower child.
Right. Finding herself, emotions float in and out. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's funny, and I can be, and this is just a side, but sometimes I can be turned off with films like that. Sometimes I can be thinking, okay, how are you making money? There's other people out schlepping around, and you're out there, what do you do for a living? But I didn't think that this time. I just kind of empathize with her in some level, and she is struggling to find herself. You're right. It's straight from that time, like from The Graduate, where Dustin Hoffman trying to find himself. That was,
Well, and there's even a shared language with Easy Rider as a 60s counterculture film.
Right.
It's just kind of Easy Rider is kind of like this gruff man version of being a flower child. Like you're a hippie on a motorcycle hitting the road trying to find yourself.
That's a great point. This is and Henry Jaglom, that's interesting. He was always trying to be, and hold on to you got great thoughts going, Cole. Is Henry Jaglom's apparently he was, I think his mom wanted a little girl, and he was like the fourth kid or the third one, and the dad says, "Nope, we're done," and four boys, and so he always felt for his mother, and so he always tried. Apparently, from that, he tried to look at the world from a woman's point of view, and that led to this incredible like 20 films, and he looks at the world from a women's point of view, which is interesting to think a women's version of Easy Rider, kind of a
I do think it is like a feminine version of a very similar story. It is trying to take like a piece of like a cultural zeitgeist, like a real moment that's happening there in the late 60s with like this, disillusionment that a lot of the young people had with, I guess, the times, and this really strong counterculture movement. And I think this film captures those moments well. I even like a lot of the scenes where it's just kind of like the other people in their lives just hanging out. I really love the scene of the girl talking about, like, she just kind of has a mental breakdown.
Oh yeah,
random side character.
You see it like
three separate times. It cuts to it, but I also she's pretty much telling the story about how she didn't feel safe walking down the street alone in New York, like, later at night.
Yeah,
and then she like started to kind of, in her words, get turned on by this experience that she was feeling unsafe. But I think what they're trying to highlight is just that, like, these young people are so, like, have kind of, there's a romanticizing of danger that is happening.
Right.
And we're seeing that because that's intercutted with her relationship with Mitch, Jack Nicholson's character.
Right.
Mustache Nicholson.
Yeah, who comes in and is the danger.
That actress that played that part, her name was, I think, Gwen Wells. We had Tuesday Weld as Susan, and then Gwen Wells was the woman. And you're right; those parts, you're thinking, how does this connect? But it really does connect. It's almost like on a subconscious level. And her performance is fantastic. It's just she just breaks. And it's like she only feels safe with other people that have been cast aside. She feels she's been cast aside, and even though it's not
isolated, that's what she keeps saying.
Say it again.
Because she's not isolated. That's what
she
keeps saying.
Exactly. Oh, and it comes together somehow through the editing. That guy, this is a good editor, Henry Jaglom. Wow. Apparently he spent a year editing this film. And
I think and I think anyone who watches this film will probably feel this way. You pretty much said as much.
Yeah.
You do feel so jarred at the beginning. I think it's really hard to get your footing, your foot in the door,
especially if you don't know. Yeah, because that was and I think that's why I didn't like it as much as it seems like you two like it, because my starting off place was not as good.
Right.
Because I was a little bit like, I was not expecting this. But like the beginning, it's also like when it cuts from past, present, and future, it happens more frequently and it happens a lot faster.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, as we get later in the movie, the last 20 minutes, it really slows down, and you're really only seeing 3 parts of the past being past, present, and future.
And I will say, I do think the pacing of the editing I appreciate more later in the later stages of the film.
Yeah.
Because I do like the way that it's told, in the way that it uses past, present, and future, especially because I just do think it's like a disillusioned youth who really is like just kind of going with the wind. Yeah, or like just I kind of empathize with that feeling where it feels like you think time doesn't really have as much meaning to you, I guess, when you're in that. It's like it's not a positive thing, I don't think, being in that mind state.
Right. But no.
But yeah, and it's more digestible when he gives the story at least a little bit of breath before playing with time.
But also with the editing in particular, like, at times I don't think it was necessarily good, and that happened quite frequently for me, where it was almost like every time I took a class or did a workshop or a camp and editing is brought up, two scenes were always mentioned. The editing for the dinner or lunch scene in Bohemian Rhapsody, and the jumping over the fence that Liam Neeson does in Taken. Yeah. Those two, but they were always mentioned because of how bad they were. Yeah. And there were times where I thought I could teach that in a class for the worst way possible. Yeah. Because it'd be one of those, like, you'd be in the past. Just to clarify for those that haven't watched this movie, you'd be in the past for, or like one of the time frames, not for a very long period of time, sometimes a bit longer than others, but like in some of the like conversation scenes, like there was one in particular that I remember where her character is talking to Orson Welles, and it cuts to a reaction shot that's still within like that Orson Welles time period, and it's not supposed to be, because you can see her, so it's not supposed to be a different, oh, you don't know what time. It was just bad editing, in my opinion. Yeah. Like, and that happened a few times, and it was almost taking me out because stuff like that would happen too much. And since the whole, I guess, gimmick of this is editing, right, like, you're not supposed to feel in one place, but something like that would really take me out. You should feel more fluid. Yeah, like I would get lost at where characters are standing. Yeah. And then that would be a problem when it would cut to the future or the past. Like there was, but also I think this would be a really good conversation for really good editing, because there was one that I absolutely loved where she's talking. I wish I wrote down the line, but I didn't. But she's talking to her lover in the, I guess, present. Yeah. And this is when they're still like really into each other. Yeah. Or I guess as into people as she possibly can be. As attached as she can be. Yeah. Yeah. But she's talking, and it's like a side profile of her, and she's saying this line, and it match cuts straight into the future, where she's finishing off the line, and it was just this really solid, fluid transition where it goes from this present to the future, and it keeps in that scene. It kept cutting between the two as she's having this conversation with him, and she's saying, "I really did believe I could fly." And it would cut to the future. That was the scene. That's what it was. That is really good. I had to get there eventually. And then you would see the past parts where Orson Welles is doing wizard stuff with this ball that's flying in the air. And I love that she has like a moment with the flying where he's talking to him, and she's like, "You won't tell anybody, right?" And she's telling this. And at least in my head, I think she's a kid in that scene, talking to him, telling him like, "I have a secret. I can fly." Right. And you won't tell anybody. That's really where I started feeling like she was childlike, right, in general. Because they are not going to believe if you tell them. And it's intercutting with the scene they're having at lunch when he is like actually kind of calling her like at least dumb, or like not, or naive for having like such a strong belief in this that she's gonna cry. We do see that the men in this definitely see her, are happy to use her, but do see her as dumb. I mean, Jack Nicholson's character straight up calls her simple-minded and then ask for what he wants, like directly. Yeah,
Yeah, that's I got one little tidbit with the flying stuff. Henry Jaglom, in his early acting, he acted on he acted with on oh god okay I'm trying to anyway, I'm not going to say the name, but the act on a show called The Flying Nun, and The Flying Nun starred I can't remember, she's incredibly famous, Forrest Gump's mother, the actor, you know who I'm talking about. That's yeah, she's it's bugging me that anyway. The Flying Nun, old TV show from the early 60s, and this nun where Henry Jaglom is acting, I'm just thinking, where do you get these flying thing other than the dream we've all had, where when you wake up from that dream and there's always, the flying dream, which is so, they're so weird, and you wake up and you go, did I fly? And so that's, that I kind of enjoyed the movie referencing that. but then the flying nun in this old series, her nun's habit would just would adopt would and all of a sudden the actress Sally Field, that's the actor, she played Gidget too, and she would just be flying, and that was the plot of the 30-minute long silly flying. But Henry Jaglom's in that, so I'm thinking, where do those flying influences come from? And and to me, you're right. When they cut to him, and both men are kind of just not really appreciating her, and kind of thinking that she's not she's naive, and we've all had that dream, and it just is. And I just love the way she's kind of holding on to that. Another thing that was kind of struck me too is this: we're in this age, 1971, we're going more digital, we're getting not completely there yet at all, but we're still going more numbers oriented. And I can totally remember when phone numbers, like the first number I ever had, that I can remember when I was like 8 years old, was Logan 46703, and LO, stood for 56 on the phone, but you just knew it as Logan. And so I love the way she's talking. No, these numbers mean something, and he just didn't want to. Finally, he kind of got into her world a little bit and said, no, maybe these are worth hanging on to. But it's some interesting stuff in that film. That's and you're right about the men.
To find some very small connection that nobody else would have ever guessed.
Was beautiful.
I thought that was just some random director BS that he made up on the spot. But that's a crazy reference.
Yeah. Oh, I can remember when it changed. All of a sudden, I remember the next number. You remember your early number. Then we gave up the Logan part, and it became 569-8038. And it's like, but that was not as romantic as having those.
Yeah, and that's her point, is that like we got to hold on to this like romanticism,
right,
while we can still have it.
What are we losing?
Well, that's what it starts off. The movie starts off with a cover of the song La Vie en Rose.
Mm-hmm.
And then you hear the original version by Edith Piaf.
Mm-hmm.
And then you hear it again in piano form, poorly played on piano, but that was also part of the scene. It was supposed to be bad.
Yeah.
And La Vie en Rose is French for, this is roughly translated, I'm not great at French, right, but it means looking at the world through rose-tinted glasses.
And
the song, yeah, I absolutely love that song too. I was really hoping for Louis Armstrong version.
Yeah, I was
really
like, good too.
I was like, oh, you set it up so good. Yeah. It could be the ending here. No, we end with this bad piano.
Can't afford that.
They already bought it twice. They didn't want. The producer said, you get two, no more.
Yeah.
But you're right, that song is also about love.
Yeah, the song's about you when you are falling in love with someone. The world looks beautiful no matter how you look at it.
Yeah.
Like that, those early stages of love give you a different way of looking at the world.
Yeah, hold me close, hold me fast. That magic spell you cast. Is La Vie en Rose.
Yeah,
I believe.
Yeah,
I've heard the Louis Armstrong version many times. Yeah, but that's the opening.
Yeah,
part, like.
I'm
not good enough at music, but that's the opening part of the song and what that means, and you see that throughout the film. I also wrote in my notes, because I had to double check. I don't remember what I was thinking at that point, but I did write most tame Jack Nicholson character.
Yeah,
part of my notes
until the end.
And I remember writing that down. And then he proceeded to do his classic Nicholson eyebrow thing.
Yeah.
Where he does like that weird, like they become triangles.
Yeah. I can't do it.
I can't even do an example, because like I know Will Poulter does it, but he doesn't do that intentionally. He just has eyebrows like that. But I think it's like you guys were saying earlier, like this is definitely an early Jack Nicholson role, where you kind of see Nicholson come out a few times, in particular when he's taking advantage of her.
Right.
Like, you're dumb. Now please sleep with me.
Do you know why I like simple-minded people?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Well, and then okay, just to talk about Jack. Jack is not in this movie that much, but really does steal a lot of thunder when he's in there, which is typical when Jack Nicholson's in a movie just a little bit.
But like the other lover was in it from the beginning of the film, and I came out of it like, oh yeah, that guy was in it too, I guess. When you look up the movie,
I know,
and the cast list, he's the first one listed on there, and he's like a side character. He's listed before Orson Welles, who is in it less than Nicholson, I think. Or at least he has less dialogue.
Yeah, roughly.
He probably has more screen time, but he definitely has less dialogue.
Filmed everything at the park and the zoo.
Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, that's it.
But I really like there is a theme of these young people kind of courting danger, and like Nicholson's character is the danger that directly comes. Yeah. And she immediately pushes away the security, which is what she finds in this guy who's obviously not as involved in the counterculture as her. That's kind of like this outside presence, a skeptic even, who's willing to open his mind to a little bit of it so he can have access to her because he thinks he loves her. Right.
He's always the one. He plays the one that the girls like, whereas the other guy, who was, the first credit, the original boyfriend, is the one that the girls' parents like.
Right.
That's a good.
Well, and
the girl likes Jack.
With her original boyfriend, I think she enjoys the security of it to a degree. It's not something she's used to in her life. It's the only security she really has in her life. But the moment danger presents itself, she would much rather court danger. And that danger is very, very real. It showed up at 4 a.m. off of New York Street.
And what he says, he says, well, what happened to my last girlfriend? She says, what happened to, I can't remember, what was her name?
Rita.
Well, Rita's not with us
That's
anymore.
Right. Yeah. because she, before they court, she's like, did Rita kick you out again? Saying all this stuff about Rita. Because apparently that's normally something him and Rita have a fight or whatever. And they're sitting there and it's like, they have that afterglow and they're sitting there together. And Jack Nicholson just goes, what if I told you I killed Rita? And then he goes on this whole little thing about how he thinks he should, and she says it earlier, she has the same sentiment that if you want it, you should be able to just do it. And he talks about ex-lovers and how he would rather just his ex-lovers not be around.
Yeah, see, he said that right after I wrote my note.
And then he's like, I'm gonna kill all my ex-lovers.
And then I was like, oh, there it is.
Wouldn't you be afraid of being an ex-lover of mine? He essentially says that while they're in bed together. And it is, but I think it's really interesting. I will say there is one aspect of this movie that I think is very intentional, and I don't know if I necessarily love it versus Easy Rider. And that is in Easy Rider, there is explicit drug use. And I mean that because that's part of the counterculture. Yeah. And you can't tell me without watching this film
that they're on something.
She's obviously into the psychedelics of the time. I would think.
Right.
And at least her social group certainly is.
Yeah, the Goldblum shrooms.
yeah. Well, it very much gives like LSD, Flower Child stuff, but there's not, I think Easy Rider was so intentional at wanting to represent the counterculture that they made sure those things were explicitly in there, even though that was difficult for a movie at the time. I mean,
because censorship.
There is explicit drug use in that film. There is like LSD, there's marijuana, I think there's cocaine for a second, and I think it's one of the oldest films, if not the oldest film I can think of, besides maybe like some older Cheech and Chong films, where there's explicit,
pretty much any movie that takes place.
Yeah, the end of the Hays Code was.
Yeah,
it was the end of the Hays Code. Yeah,
drugs.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter when it was made. If it takes place in the 60s or 70s, drugs.
Yeah,
expect drugs. Expect a lot of drugs.
And I'm not saying that there needed to be like a weird glorification or like it's super prevalent, but I do think there is a part of it that is like directly affecting her and her in the way she's perceiving time. And he's basing it off of these real. He talks about in that interview you sent us. He talks about how he's basing it off of real life people and how those real life people are super into the counterculture movement at the time. And I'm willing to bet that those real life people were probably experimenting with some of those things.
Right. But that's also probably why one girl had like a mental breakdown, because they were all, it was like 6-7 people in a room together. They're all like, and she does half naked,
right?
And it doesn't look that hot.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna be honest. But
everyone's sweaty in this though.
Oh, yeah,
New York in the summer, right?
At that time. They had like such harsh lighting because they were using like 30K HMIs and didn't have anything like LED lights didn't exist back then, so they're just being blasted with like 70 degrees right in their face.
The ISO of the film stock was probably around 100. I'm thinking max.
So they needed it.
So how did you guys feel about because Henry Jaglom specifically, and you guys have done good research on this, Henry Jaglom specifically talked about his effect of Jack Nicholson. What did you guys feel? And we can cover that in a second. What did you guys feel about the effect? Because I mean, especially at the end when it's 4 a.m. in the morning and he comes by and the initial boyfriend, well, hey, I found some wine, and just she's so cold. Just leave. Yeah. And even Jack Nicholson shows a little empathy. I can't do this. There's another guy in the house. No, how would I feel if and it's like it's amazing. Wow, Jack, I wrote down Jack Nicholson empathy. Whoa. But then the empathy kind of fades. And so how did you guys feel about the effect of that on the film?
Well, I think there's a really interesting line she has when he comes back. And it is played as if maybe that is the next day. I'm not certain that's actually the next day.
Right.
But based on how she perceives time, that could have been a month later when he had time to cool down from things. But like she's like does not feel sorry about it because her morality is very based on I wanted it, so I did it.
Yeah.
And he's talking about it. He's like, did y'all blah blah? Like he doesn't say it explicitly, and she goes, oh yeah. And she was like, he's awfully good at it. And it's just like saying this to him, and then it's like, and he hurts me. You never hurt me. And once again, we have that courting of danger. And his effect on the film, I think, is really profound because I do think like some of the romanticism for that original boyfriend, like that what he existed in, I think has died a little bit.
You don't see him as much after that point.
No, but when you still see, and he's I think presented a little bit more as afar. Like a lot of the scenes where he's watching everyone from the outside looking in, I think a lot of those scenes are actually post that when he's just like watching her and her friends go across the thing. He's always been the outsider, but I think he's even more,
because earlier in the movie you see him like insert himself into the Ouija board thing that they had going on,
right, trying to be a part of the group.
like not understanding what's happening or what they're doing, why they're doing it, or even why they're stopped, but he's still actively trying to engage with everybody.
And he doesn't later or the scenes that I believe are later on.
He's more like watching.
Yeah, and I do think some of that is like, he became swept up in this, this alt girl that he like kind of, fell for, and he became maybe disillusioned. I mean, she was so ready to push him aside just for an evening of fun. Right. And I think by her words and actions made it clear that she'd do it again. And so I don't know. I think it's really interesting. And he does finally continue his dialogue, which is he sometimes speaks into camera and sometimes it's just floating around about like, I'll love you from Rome to Vienna.
That's right.
Vienna to this. And he does finish that. And I think that's ultimately
it starts to stutter and break up. That is it starts to become, after Jack Nicholson. I love that. Yeah, I love the way that it kind of started to stutter, and you can just feel it's all breaking up. Yeah,
right. He really starts. It's like when he's going through like the European cities. Yeah. It's like really easy for him, and then as the relationship develops and that love has to stretch farther, he starts to like stutter and have an issue with it. And I think that's like, I took that as like, once again, it's all told out of order, but like I left with the impression that like he's going to stay with her and kind of continue to use her the way that he was throughout the film, but like these rose colored glasses, like the have been kind of peeled off.
Yeah.
Say that last part again, Cole.
The rose tinted glasses.
Beautiful. Gets back to that.
And that's the third time we hear, like at the end of the movie, we hear La Vie en Rose for the third time. And that's when he's playing it on the piano.
Poorly.
Yeah, and he's doing it poorly.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's like maybe even a little intentional.
I think so.
Because you hear it perfectly fine the first two times. Within the time frame. Like it might stop, but that would only be because it's going out of the scene into another scene and then back to the scene with whoever's listening to it. It might, pause every now and then. But like for him, he right, like I don't know. I feel like that, like a broken record almost. Like when you watch movies and they have broken records and they start skipping and repeating and repeating. Usually there's like something that's happening within the scene that helps like carry it forward in a very subtle and nuanced.
And that matches those cities in Europe, the way it's discordant. Wow. I mean, there are some scathing reviews on this film. I mean, it is.
I looked up that up.
But I got to admit,
like this film.
But the more I talk about it, you realize the more we talk about it, there was a lot of thought into this film. I mean, and the music is a whole nother level. I really hadn't thought about that going into it. But you're bringing that out, and it's consistent. It's a whole piece. What Jaglom said is kind of interesting about the Jack Nicholson part. He viewed that in a sense as a dagger that he intentionally stuck in the film. He said it's a screw. He said Jack Nicholson's screwing her, screwing the kind boyfriend, and screwing the audience. And it's kind of an interesting, just a real, and then that throws us into this note of discordancy after that. It's not great. It's not pleasant. You also wonder what happened to Rita. You're worried about what's going to happen to her. The film changes at that point.
It's a real shark in the water.
It really is. Well put.
I'm not going to lie. I was mildly disappointed that he didn't go all in on the weirdness and have her actually fly at the end. Like when it ended with Orson Welles lifting the ball into the air. I truly thought that scene was going to be grabbing her as a kid and like lifting her into the air in one of his magic.
Cut to Sally Field as a flying nun. What happens what's your take on what happens at the end? What do you guys think?
I have two interpretations of what potentially happens. I think it is hinted that she flies away.
Right.
Okay. I think she could have just fled and ran, which would fit her character, just to flee and like I'm going to set up somewhere else. However, I think the interpretation that I ran away with is that this courtship with danger led to her death. I personally think she opens her box. She's like in a manic state. She is upset that her wish was to fly again, or remember how to fly. She doesn't believe that she opened the box too early, that her wish didn't come true. And I think he's looking for her on the roof, and I think she's jumped off. That's my interpretation. I think
it doesn't fly. And I just looked up what you were talking, because I love those interpretations. I just looked up. I was thinking Birdman, director Inarritu. And I thought he had.
That's what I was expecting to happen. Is like the ending of Birdman, where he just randomly starts flying away. In this movie, there is no real reason to start flying away.
And doesn't Birdman have those reflections? I love the reflections in his glasses. I mean, that's crazy. And the stuff and the stuff that's projected on the faces is also cool too. But
I did really like that, because she is kind of seeing her life through this
flash through his eyes, like the reflection on his glasses.
And then the projector on her face, like it's almost like she's watching how her entire life went down. So maybe she did die.
Well, and then I also think there is like, I'll fly away. Like there is like this, like, there is a connection between the concept of flying away and passing on. And I definitely like, my interpretation of the ending is that, this courtship with danger uh is going to lead one way, and you see it Jaglom says it in that interview about how he felt like at the time with some of the young people there was a real romanticizing of suicide.
Wow.
And I think you also see that with the lady who has the breakdown. She talks about how she took too many sleeping pills, and the only time that she ever wished she was dead is when she woke up and they said you almost died and she didn't.
Wow.
And then that same girl's talking to her boyfriend later, completely unrelated to anything else in this movie, and the boyfriend's talking about how I would kill myself if you died. And he talks about how I have 20 sleeping pills and I would just take and I have them just in case something happens to you.
Wow. And that kind of speaks to, it's funny, and I was thinking of how women have related to his films about women, and you can see it's not necessarily that they're empowered, but it shows the limited amount of choice, the limited amount of agency that they had maybe at this time. And because we're still 4 years away from, or no, we're 6 years away from Princess Leia, who's got a lot of snark and a lot of and a lot of agency, but we're in 71, and so God, oh my God, wake up and wish you were dead. That's the limited amount. Whoa.
It reminds me a lot of Henrik Ibsen's A Doll's House with Nora as a character who like realizes at some point I've had no agency in the entirety of my life and I am a grown woman with children, but like those children aren't really my children because it was never my choice to have them. It was my husband's choice, and that husband's not really my husband because I didn't choose to marry him. My father arranged this marriage, and and she just flees. And it's not, and she abandons her family, and you're not really supposed to think that Nora is a moral character. She does immoral things throughout the play, and I feel the same way about Noah in this. I don't think you're supposed to think she's some moral character or that like what she ultimately does is good. I just think it's supposed to be a representative of like this person is disillusioned with their circumstance.
Right, just like the other one, is and when I saw Gwen Wells, I thought, was that Orson Welles' daughter? Because he had like it's spelled the same way, but it's not. And he's got, I think he's got 3 daughters. One daughter really looked up the art that he did. Orson Welles started off as an artist in the 30s, and anyway, connection to Orson Welles, and then at the Houston Museum of Fine Arts, they recently had Orson Welles art on display, which is so cool. I bet his storyboards are fantastic. But anyway, no, I think you're right about the agency, and that's such a fascinating connection that you made there to the Ibsen play. I mean, wow, and it also kind of ties back to Jaglom himself. When his mom, the dad says, nope, no more kids. You're not going to get that daughter. And so he ends up providing, working to provide that sense of agency. There's a poet that I'd heard of, Anais Nin, and apparently she fell in love. I was looking for favorable reviews of this film. She fell in love with the film in 1971. She's kind of a famous poet, deep thinker, and she falls in love with this film, gets a 16 millimeter print and shows it to colleges all over the place in 71, 72, 73, because it's such, he almost has to do self-distribution because this is not a big studio release film at all. So she takes the film around, shows it to college classes, but she would not say that a man made the film until after the students watch the film, and then they're just blown away that it was a male director that made this film.
Wow. There's definitely like there's a real femininity to it. And obviously, like the purpose of the film is obviously to give a you know, a more female's perspective to the counterculture at the time. And
that's a good point. Some of the reviews, and I had a question for you guys just on this whole philosophy. Some of the, and I remember this kind of from film school too, because my film school was really experimental. We actually should have had a little more dose of classic, like a little more John Ford wouldn't have hurt. But nonetheless, the experimental side was interesting. And so you'd watch a film and you'd go, I'm not sure, got it. What would that? But this film is a little bit easier to interpret, although it still challenges you big time. And from your interpretations, I've gotten so much more out of the film. I liked it at the beginning of this discussion, but I mean, I'm really enjoying it even more as we go into it. But the idea that some of the Reddit kind of comments on this film kind of, said you're going to get more out of the film once you see this interview with Henry Jaglom. But that opens the idea, is that right? Should you be able to, do you need to have that, you know what I'm saying? Is that right? Should we need to have that interpretation to make the film better? What do you guys think on that? I've always wondered.
Okay, I would argue that is a weak point of the film. Not that it completely discredits the film.
Right. Good point.
Right. But I think like a great example of this is Memories of Murder by Bong Joon-ho. When I first watched that film, it has an open ending, and I don't know if I was absolutely in love with the ending, but then I could not stop thinking about that ending and like how Birdman. To interpret it. And this is one of my all-time favorite movies. And like, I think it's like when I first watched that movie, I have like a scale of 1 to 10 that like I kind of keep in my mind when I'm thinking of certain films. And like I was thinking that's like 7.5, 8. And then the next day I was just thinking about it more and more. I'm like, the movie's a 9. And then at the end of it, I was like, it is executed flawlessly and I can't stop thinking about it. It's probably a 10. And it's like, I think this movie is good in the sense that like I'm going to think about it a lot. And the more I think about it, the more I enjoy it, the more interesting I find the characters. It's a character-driven movie. However, I think throughout the entirety of an hour and a half is the execution flawless? I wouldn't go that far.
Right.
And so like, I think the perfect movie is a movie that does allow its audience to interact with it, but still gives them things to think about. And I think that's sometimes an impossible thing to hit. And I actually think there's very few movies that accomplish both of those things to a high degree. But I think that's what makes great movies.
Yeah, that's a great point, and leaves you some. And sometimes the first time you watch The Searchers, you can be a little bit okay. That was but it's like an open door to research more, to look more, and that door is open. And then if the film's, I think what you're saying, the film is good enough to where you want to go through that door again, do some more research, and then what you gain from it, then you start to realize there's a lot in this film. So, and this film certainly hits that mark. I mean, man, it just,
like it's kind of to piggyback off of Cole. 2 things, 2 movies, I guess. The first one, Eraserhead. Everybody knows that nobody knows anything about Eraserhead because David Lynch refused to talk about it in his lifetime. R.I.P. Real one.
Yes.
But and I had purchased that, half off sale. I was like, all right, all these film nerds at school keep talking about Eraserhead. I guess I gotta watch it. All these pretentious film nerds. I hope they're listening to this. I know they'll eventually listen to this podcast to see our opinions, and I hope that they get offended that I call them that. But I remember watching it, and I sat there, and I was like, "What the hell did I just watch?" And I remember somebody was trying to I won't name names, but somebody was like trying to he had never finished it. He got too anxious, so he couldn't finish it. So he had to look up interviews and stuff about it. And he was trying to tell me about it, and I just was like, I didn't outright ignore him, but in my brain I was ignoring it because I was like, No, I think that's a movie that if I find out the true meaning of it, I'm not going to like it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to know.
Sometimes the beauty's in the interpretation.
Sometimes it's just left unsaid, or you end up thinking that your interpretation's better than the intention. And sometimes the intention, that can be a subjective thing. Like, David Lynch's intention versus my interpretation of that film, they're probably two different things. They may be the same. I don't want to know, though.
Yeah, yours is valid. Totally valid. Yeah.
Yeah. When you pick apart literature, I think it's the same thing where it's like, I'm finding these connections here, and that might not be something that the author was cognitive of when they did it, but that doesn't mean it's an invalid connection.
That's right.
And that does happen all the time. And you see that a lot more now with like social media and creators like interacting with fans. Like ask me a question and they'll say, "Oh, is this like an homage to this movie?" And they're like, "The hell are you talking about? I've never heard of that in my entire life." They're like, "Oh," and then like you're kind of disappointed by that fact. But the second one is actually this movie.
Yeah.
The second movie is this movie. Because yesterday when I was in the car with Andre and Alyssa, we were on our way to a film showcase. Alyssa asked me how the movie was. I was like, "Yeah, I think we're gonna get into the podcast tomorrow on O'Brien, and I'm gonna find out O'Brien liked it a lot more than I did." But like, as I was like kind of like sitting there on the drive back, I was like, not as bad as I thought it was.
Maybe hey, I'm telling you.
And then like I woke up this morning and I was like, actually kind of interested in how this interaction goes, because I might just sit here like,
yeah, no, you're not. You're not.
But then I woke up and I was like, okay, I'm not going to sit here like, I gotta talk about this movie.
You brought the sound, you brought the music to it, Isaac. The level of music, because I honestly thought so many of the songs were irritating, old. You know what I'm saying? And
I picked up on the song. Like I love that song, and there was a point where I heard it so much, because I was listening to like older jazz, but also it plays in a. Actually, that song is in a video game, BioShock Infinite, Cole.
Yeah.
And in that game, the main character does see the past, present, and future at the same time. It's not pretentious at all. But that actually goes back to interpretations. Like the first game in that series, people interpret it as like a critique on Ayn Rand, because it's everywhere about how Atlas Shrugged basically sucks. That's the entire plot of the first game. And I remember finding out that the creator, like somebody asked him about Ayn Rand, or like how much, like what his thought process was. He was like, "I'm gonna be real with you. I wrote that when I was incredibly high. I don't remember anything." And I was like mildly disappointed when I found that out, because I was like, now I feel like there's less to take away from this.
Yeah.
Because this could have just been some like
but I just think I don't think it necessarily means that, right? Because it's like, first of all, like subconscious does affect art. You know, in the subconscious of a creator.
There's a good chance he read Ayn Rand, hated it so much he had to get high, and then really wrote one of the greatest games ever made. Like,
it's pure subconscious.
Stuff like that happens, though. That's the crazy thing about like art, or even like films and games, and even theater to an extent. But theater doesn't take as long to make as film and games do. Ooh. Because like it's not that they just wrote it through their subconscious. They continued through with like a whole crew and like all these other people picking apart their interpretations, and they got to say yes and no to certain things and keep going with it.
What's the name of this game again?
BioShock.
Oh, BioShock, right. Would it be, that is Criterion Game Collection? You never know.
Honestly, it would be.
It would be.
It actually would
be if that existed.
It would be in the Criterion.
That now that I think about it, L'Avion Rose plays with that one main character in the third game that sees past, present, and future all it. Who knows? Maybe this guy watched it and then he got high again because he hated it and then wrote a game.
All right, hey fellas, we are running.
Oh yeah.
2 hours. Right. We have been at it a while.
I did figure
I'll just say Henry Jaglom continued to make films. It's fascinating. Just one last, just for listeners. I mean, he's still alive. I think his film, God, made a film in 2020. I mean, apparently really and great actors in his films, all of which are kind of independent, non-studio type projects, but they sound fascinating. So that's my one last thing. I know we're running out of time. So
I did figure though that this first episode
would go
listeners would be longer because we got to establish what exactly this is, but we also had to dissect the movie. I think every episode after this will just be us dissecting the movie. And that whole spiel we had at the beginning is over.
That sounds good because I'm one of those listeners who sometimes is like, when are they going to get to the movie? When are they going to get to the movie? And I'm like 15 seconds and 15
Good thing we have Cole for that because my ADHD brain, Cole saw me a few times just like pull out my phone to check notes that I never even brought up or check like some random coffee factor reviews or something that I also never brought up. And of course, like for those that are listening, seconds before we hit record or O'Brien hit record on the Zoom meeting, he was like, I gotta ask a few clarifying questions for you guys, and then launched into his dissection of the film. And Cole and I had to stop him, and we were like, "Dude, you got to save it for the podcast.
Save it for the podcast." You're right.
That's what we were laughing so hard about because that's the most O'Brien thing possible.
Well, before we break, are we going to run the random number?
Oh, wait, I have a question because I thought this would be fun. And this is gonna let me pull up the random number generator real quick. I can only do one thing at a time or multiple things at a time. Who knows? But do you guys think now, as we established earlier, Criterion preserves films for the sake of preserving them.
Yep.
But their larger mission and why Criterion does specific films is they do something that's important. Maybe it's important on a cultural level, like
Godzilla versus Mothra.
Armageddon.
Yeah, like the Godzilla movies. Like Godzilla is huge on a cultural level. It could be important as a filmmaking thing, Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I guess that tackles both. But it could also be a third reason of like there's tons and tons of movies out there that don't really see a release outside of its own country.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't popular enough in its own country to get a release.
Right.
One of my favorite Criterions was only ran in the 90s for 2 weeks in China.
Yeah.
Wow.
Only 2 weeks in
China. Without a Criterion release.
Farewell, My Concubine, because it was actually banned in China after 2 weeks because it talked bad about Mao Zedong.
Yeah.
It was a horrible human being, but
right.
Well, our podcast is no longer on China. Now, there it is, guys. But and so Criterion helps movies like that for some reason can't get a release, or they were destroyed, like the Apu trilogy. I heard I heard a podcast about like the guy that helped try to find the things, and like so many of the facilities had like burned down that it took them several years to even get the copies to begin the scanning process, which then took them another 3. It was like a decade. That release was like almost a decade in the making.
Yeah.
But also, like I said earlier, sometimes it's none of those 3 things, and the film is about to die and has to be preserved.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you guys is, why do you think this was in the Criterion? Do you think it's because it's an important film? Or do you think it's just one of those films they had to do it because it was on the verge of death?
I think that is interesting because it's definitely not like a well-supported film from a streaming standpoint. Mm-hmm. I mean, I did see it's on Amazon Prime for like 10 days.
Yeah.
But it is one of those things where it's a little, I don't know. I do think there is like bare bones historical significance in the fact that this is a cult director who does have albeit not a large, but a dedicated following.
The kind of thing Criterion like thrives on.
Right. And it's largely a cult following of like, you know, like first wave feminists from the 60s. You know what
60s
I mean?
counterculture. Criterion released it as part of a 60s counterculture set with Easy Rider and Head. I can't remember the other films, but it felt like almost like we got to put this one in. You know, it's almost like the neglected stepchild of. But man, it's a good film. I mean, you know, and it's got some interesting. Apparently, I was reading about that whole set. It's like 6 films and pretty good special features with them too. This one had fewer special features. I think some of the ones we probably saw on YouTube were, but anyway, I think that's how it. Got part of the set. Counterculture, early feminist. Yeah,
and I do think there's historical significance in the fact that, like, one, at this time period, there were no like studios who were producing
stuff like this,
or stuff even like Easy Rider. Like they weren't big studios weren't producing these counterculture films. These were all independent projects. So one, they need to be preserved, and then two, there is historical significance. I mean, this is Jack Nicholson is still an indie actor at this point. He is one of the best-selling blockbuster actors to have ever done it. He's still an indie actor, and he's with Orson Welles in this movie.
Coming out of the Roger Corman school.
That's still interesting.
Yeah, like that was the thing for me. I was like, a safe place. Oh, this could go any way. And I saw Orson Welles and Jack Nicholson on the cast. I was like, I'm watching.
That worked.
Like even Criterion made that a point. Like, and honestly, they really did steal the whole movie from everybody else.
Yeah, they did.
I'm not gonna lie. They were really good. But another thing is, like, it wasn't just studios weren't putting out 60s counterculture. Non-linear films were not a thing at that point. Like Quentin Tarantino, this is why Pulp Fiction is so
not in US films.
Yeah, that's true. But like this is why Pulp Fiction is so important with films, because Tarantino, he may despise that. Knowing Tarantino, probably despise that it's mainstream now. But like the whole non-linear thing, he like made it popular in the Western world. And people were like, this non-linear thing is actually really cool. And so like now we see it pretty frequently.
Right. Well, but you also but it wasn't a thing in the Western audiences, because like you had Rashomon is completely non-linear, and then you also have there's plenty of French New Wave films that are told in the non-linear style.
But that also goes back to Criterion. Like majority of those did not have Western releases.
That's true.
Rashomon did eventually,
right?
But like a lot of Kurosawa's, it had to get a point to where it was super popular for Japan to be like, oh, here you go, everybody else.
I actually don't know if Rashomon ever had a.
I don't know.
I don't think it had a.
But it would have at least had like theater screen, like small indie theaters.
Rashomon's what made him become prevalent in
the map.
West.
Yeah,
and an event inevitably led to Seven Samurai being everywhere else. But I think I'm taking into facts. This is number 548. Which is very low on the Criterion number. And Criterion heads kind of have noticed this more frequently. Like I said at the beginning, they just announced Flow, which is a brand new movie. So is Zenora. Both of them literally came out last year.
Wow.
And got Oscars.
It's already. Wow. They're going to take it from Disney.
But my point is 548. That would have been a point when Criterion wasn't doing more modern films, and they were just even more so than they are now. Like the older they are, the more weird and artsy and out there and less loved. We'll put it like that. Less loved films.
We're going to protect them.
We'll protect them. Like obviously we'll do Citizen Kane when we get the licensing.
Yeah.
But films like this, we're going to do all our focus on.
There's also the aspect of we're talking about the two categories where the licensing from the business standpoint is easiest for them. Super old and forgotten, not considered necessarily a mainstream classic, way easier to get the licensing for. Newer films, that are probably going to go that aren't. This can kind of go either way, but like newer films that are predominantly going to be living on a streaming platform, and a streaming platform isn't interested in making a physical release. It can be easier. Now, you also have like Apple Studios who are straight up just like, we're not giving anyone the rights to do a physical release, and we won't do a physical release.
Wow.
Or Netflix, who will say yes if Criterion asks.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's like 3 Netflix: Marriage Story, Pinocchio, and the black and white one, Roma.
I can't wait to the Netflix has got The Other Side of the Wind, which really became Orson Welles' last major film. Years after he passed away. It's incredible, and they're still negotiating Netflix Criterion to get the rights to The Other Side of the Wind. Well, speaking of numbers, are you ready to spin the wheel?
Well, we can talk for another hour if we want to.
I was gonna ask, what do you guys rate this? Well, let's bring back the coffee thing. Let's make a bean rating.
Okay.
Yeah, like out of 5 beans, where do you rate this?
Okay. So my scale, I have a very definitive 10-part scale that I work on, but I'll just half that.
Okay, we can do 10 beans.
Okay,
10 I like beans. That. 10 beans.
Because for me, 5 is completely neutral. 6 is good. 7
that's
is
fair.
Great.
That's good. I like that.
Very good movie. 8 is great. 9 is a phenomenal film that I just don't have a severe emotional
attachment
to, and 10 is a film that
that makes sense.
I love.
That's pretty much what I go. Yeah. Anything below 5, I'm never gonna watch again.
Right. 4 is mediocre. 3 is bad. 2 is very bad, and 1 is cannot defend this film in any regards.
For me, if it's 5, it's bad, but I enjoy it.
Yeah,
and I probably will watch it again if it's just on, or if I'm like, I want to watch something stupid.
I think I would give this movie. I'm like on the verge of like a 7 or an 8. I think I'll go with 7. I think it's a very good film. It's something I definitely watch again and ingest again.
I'm gonna be an English teacher. 7 what? 7 what?
You're gonna have a 7.1.
Yeah, there we are.
I think
he said it.
I'll give it 7 beans.
I'll give it 7.5 beans. but not an 8. And I'm really not kidding with that. You know, an 8, not right now, but right now, and starting the day, maybe of our conversation, it would have been 6.5 to 7. But the more we've talked. It's not like the worse it's gotten, the better it's gotten. The more you
I agree. I agree
100%. I was right there with you. Like I started off probably 6.
I was thinking 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And then the more I thought about it with my coffee this morning, I was getting a little bit of
2 shots of espresso.
Espresso really got my brain going. And then we started talking about it. I can't quite push it to that 8, like a 7's good.
Yeah,
but
that's me too. With the
I think 7 light roast beans for me. 7 light roast.
I go to solid 7 medium roast.
No. Maybe it should be 7 dark roast beans because it's not very It's not the easiest to digest.
Yeah,
and it's kind of hard to understand sometimes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're doing minimum of number 1 all the way to maximum of 1264. Now, we did talk, O'Brien and I said this, but I think this goes left unsaid. There's only one number that's banned, and that's number 17.
Right. We're not doing that.
Yeah, we're not. Y'all can look up number 7.
We shall not even say the name. The movie that shall not be named.
Yes.
Kind of like Voldemort.
Right.
Yeah.
Ready? Drum roll, please. Drum roll. Drum roll.
Yeah.
Number 92.
Ooh. 92. Early.
Yeah, that's an
early.
Oh, this is gonna get weird probably. We're getting into the weird.
Pick the Sacred Mountain or something.
Oh. Is this number 19? I gotta double check. Criterion. That's 181. Interesting.
I wonder if I can Google it. It's 92?
Yeah, 92. Number. I'll have a more streamlined way of doing this later, I think.
It might be a Ben Stiller movie.
Oh, found it. They were trying to sell me on the new 4K copy of number 181, but number 92, it's 92 minutes long. It's black and white.
Okay.
So early Criterion, this is already getting a little weird. It's called Fiend Without a Face.
Oh, that's a great film.
Oh, there we go. No,
Brian's my God. That is so much.
It is. Oh, it's on the Criterion channel, Prime Video as well.
Sweet.
So,
oh my God. Yeah. What?
All those who are listening, we encourage you to watch along with us. Fiend Without a Face, Criterion number 92. That's going to be our next movie.
Oh, we are blessed. What would happen if a kind of alien entity, perhaps empowered by its proximity to a nuclear power plant, could get inside your brain and separate your brain and spinal cord away from your body and animate your brain and spinal cord and turn them into dangerous, vicious entities? Your brain is
I'm so there for it.
And stop motion animation.
I'm so ready to watch this. That's crazy because Criterion does not have a lot of sci-fi.
Yeah,
exactly.
All the other labels.
That's a bone to pick with them. Yeah, that's a bone to pick with. You know, we can't go on a tangent, but remember the film that they do too few sci-fi, way too few. I mean, I'm just thinking of a film like, remember that film that came out a couple of years ago with that small $3,000 Sony camera, that science fiction film?
Yeah, The Creator.
What was it called? Creator. I mean, that's a darn good film that could eventually become a Criterion film, but it's like they just never consider. That's not even the most outlandishly good science fiction film ever at all. It's just a good sci-fi film, but it's like they just don't put them in. But Fiend Without a Face, I
think their animation releases, or really this is true for all the labels. More animated films need to be preserved, but that's I can have a whole rant about that.
We'll bring that up on a separate.
Thank God for Flow.
That's exactly a whole nother area that is underrepresented.
Wall-E's a great one though, because Sir Roger Deakins helped the animators develop the cinematography, digital cinematography tools.
And he did that for Boss Baby too.
Yeah, he also did it for Rango. So 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
All right. Well, hey guys, make sure to follow along with us. I'm Cole.
I'm Isaac.
I'm O'Brien, and we'll click the stop button here. Let's see what happens. There we go.